On a Wednesday morning that had started like any other, a man named Thomas Blackwell was betrayed in the most public way possible. He had just finished his second cup of coffee in his downtown Denver office, reviewing quarterly reports on a pair of mid-cap funds, when a man in a gray suit entered the room. He looked official, but not remarkable, the kind of face that passes through a dozen offices a day without being remembered. "Thomas Blackwell?" the man asked, eyes flat, voice rehearsed. "Yes," Thomas said, already reaching for his calendar, assuming this was some sort of client appointment. The man extended a brown envelope, thick, stamped, impersonal. "You've been served." The words landed harder than they should have. For a second, the world compressed to a single sound. The low hum of the office air conditioning, the faint chatter of his assistants outside, the sterile rustle of paperwork. Then the meaning caught up to him. Served. He didn't open it right away, not because he didn't know what it was. Part of him had felt this coming for months, but because some envelopes feel radioactive. You sense that once opened, they'll rearrange the atoms of your life. He waited until the process server was gone, until the silence felt thick and private, and then he unfolded the document. It was cleanly typed, clinical, even beautiful in its formatting. 12 years of marriage reduced to margins, lines, and check boxes. The words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," in bold across the top. And below, the reason, "irreconcilable differences." 2 words that said everything and nothing. His hand trembled only once, when he reached the section labeled division of assets. She wanted 70%. His first reaction wasn't anger, it was disbelief. The kind that makes the world tilt sideways. Vanessa, his wife, the woman he had met when she was a dreamer with sketches and color swatches, now claiming the empire they built together was hers alone. He didn't read further. Not yet. He closed the file, placed it neatly beside his keyboard, and stared at the city skyline outside his window. Denver stretched beneath him, cranes, glass towers, sun glinting off windows, all symbols of growth and precision, for the things he understood best. But nothing about this was logical. When his assistant knocked on the door, he composed himself. "Everything all right?" "Blackwell?" she asked. He smiled, practiced, controlled. "Yes, just a legal matter." He went back to work. Because that's what Thomas Blackwell did when the world shifted. He found order in numbers. That night, when he got home, the house felt foreign. It still smelled faintly of sandalwood candles and espresso, Vanessa's trademarks. Her shoes were gone from the hallway. The entry table was cleared of her keys, her oversized sunglasses her touch. On the kitchen counter sat a single note. "It's time. I need to do this for me. Please don't make it harder than it has to be. V." The handwriting was elegant, detached. He sat at the counter, reading it again and again. For 12 years of shared mornings and arguments and inside jokes, summarized in one sentence that sounded like a business memo. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply began to remember. The beginning, they had met at a charity gala of all places. He was 30, already successful, a financial advisor with a quiet, analytical charm. She was 25, radiant in a way that drew attention without asking for it. Vanessa had been studying interior design, unsure of her future but certain of her talent. He remembered the first conversation, about lighting design and how ambience could change emotion. He'd smiled and said numbers did the same thing. "You just use color, I use percentages." As she laughed, he had fallen for that sound immediately. They'd married 2 years later. For a while, it had felt effortless. 2 halves completing each other, his logic balancing her creativity, her passion softening his restraint. He had funded her return to school, helped her open a design studio, registered her LLC, built her first website. When she'd panic about taxes or contracts, he handled it. He never thought of it as charity. He thought of it as love compounded over time. And for a while it worked. Mornings filled with coffee and small talk about dreams. Late nights brainstorming over fabric samples and spreadsheets. She used to say, "You're my structure, Thomas. You make my chaos look like art." But somewhere between the 10th and 12th year, the tone changed. Her client list grew. Boutique hotels, luxury condos, celebrity homes. She was interviewed in local magazines, invited to design expos, called herself a creative director. Somewhere in that rise, she stopped asking for advice. He'd see her projects online before he saw them in person. When he asked about budgets or schedules, she'd sigh. "You wouldn't get it, Thomas. It's a creative thing. The woman who once asked him to proof her proposals now rolled her eyes when he mentioned accounting. She started leasing luxury cars, hosting influencer events, hiring stylists for her photo shoots. When he'd bring up finances, she'd say, "It's branding, Thomas. You wouldn't understand." And maybe she was right. He didn't understand the new version of her, or how the warmth between them had cooled into strategy. Still, he hadn't expected this. The audit of a heart for 3 days after being served, Thomas barely slept. He went to work, kept his routines, but his mind ticked like a clock stuck between hours. He didn't call her, didn't beg or argue. He simply began to do what he did best: analyze. If Vanessa wanted to treat their marriage like a business, he'd treat it like one too. He opened folders, digital and physical, and began tracing the story of their partnership in numbers. Tuition payments, startup funds, lease deposits, vendor invoices. Each record told a truth she had forgotten. He had built the foundation she now claimed as her own. He found emails where she thanked him for believing in me, and called his early funding a loan. He'd never pressed her on that word before, loan, because love didn't keep ledgers, but now it mattered. He compiled everything: receipts, bank transfers, screenshots, even an old text where she'd said, "Technically it's ours, but it looks better in my name." Technically ours. The phrase stuck like a nail in wood. As he worked through the documentation, the emotion slowly drained from the process. What replaced it was precision, the kind that made his clients trust him with their fortunes. And beneath it all, something colder took root: resolve. The patterns. A month into the proceedings, Thomas began to notice patterns, gaps, movements, strange inconsistencies in Vanessa's company filings, transfers to new accounts, a change of registration name, unexplained vendor payments. He realized she'd been planning this for longer than she let on. She had shifted her business banking to a separate firm, rebranded under her maiden name, and quietly removed his involvement from all official documents. At first, it had seemed like independence. Now it looked like erasure. Then came the call that changed everything. One of Vanessa's early design assistants, a nervous young woman named Chloe, reached out, asking Thomas to clarify a 1099 form she'd received from a company she didn't recognize. The name on the form matched a small LLC that Thomas had never heard of, but it traced back to Vanessa's firm. Within an hour, he found the connection, for Vanessa had set up a shell account to funnel unreported client payments. Hidden income. He didn't react. He just noted it down line by line. Later he met with Mia, Vanessa's former business partner, for coffee. She didn't look surprised when he told her what he'd found. "She's been hiding money for months," Mia said softly. "Wanted to make her numbers look smaller before the divorce. Said it would help her get more support." Thomas listened, calm as a metronome. "Would you be willing to say that in court?" Mia hesitated, then nodded. Yes, someone should. And by the time he left the cafe, for Thomas understood that Vanessa hadn't filed out of emotion. She'd filed with strategy, precise, premeditated, and ruthless. But she had underestimated the man who spent his life finding hidden patterns for a living. The courtroom. The first hearing came on a snowy morning in February, for the courthouse smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. Vanessa arrived in immaculate style, tailored coat, heels, hair perfect, her expression composed. She didn't look at him. Her attorney spoke first, painting a portrait of Vanessa as a self-made success story. She built her business from the ground up, the lawyer said. Her brand's value cannot be quantified in mere numbers. Thomas listened, expression still. When it was his turn, he handed his attorney 2 folders: contributions and hidden accounts. Inside were 12 years of data, the paper trail of a marriage turned enterprise. Every dollar, every email, every proof of shared effort. When the judge opened the second folder, the one containing the false reports and shell accounts, the air changed. Vanessa's hand froze mid-page. Her lawyer's confident rhythm faltered. The judge's voice was even, but sharp. "Mrs. Blackwell, can you explain why these accounts were not disclosed?" Silence. Then a faint tremor in Vanessa's perfectly still hands. For the first time in months, Thomas saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. He didn't gloat. He didn't even look at her. He just let the numbers speak. When the session ended, the judge made no final ruling but set a tone. "We'll need a full audit of the business. And from what I can see, Mr. Blackwell's claims appear credible." As they exited, Vanessa brushed past him, her perfume fading behind her. Outside, the snow had started to fall, Slow, deliberate, like ash after a quiet fire. Thomas zipped his coat, looked at the courthouse steps, and felt something strange, not victory, not relief, but stillness. This was far from over, but for the first time since the envelope had landed on his desk, he knew the direction of gravity. Vanessa was falling, not because he'd pushed her, but because she'd stepped too close to the edge without realizing it. And he would do what he'd always done. He would stand still, steady, and let the numbers and time finish the work.